Hello nerds and nerdettes, welcome back to the channel where once again we have a new video for you guys. Today I will be giving out or putting out, presenting my video for the top 5 comic challenge that is going around on YouTube, bouncing from creator to creator. BJ Kicks recently put out his video and challenged all of the OPB jabronis to create their video format. So I took it upon myself to go ahead and shoot mine. First, a quick apology. This is going to be a little bit of a longer video, so apologies now, but I really want to go in depth about a lot of these books because these are very important books to me as a collector, comic book reader, person, individual, whatever it may be. So I do apologize for that. And also, of course, as a quick reminder, if you do want to pick up any of these books or any of the books that I've reviewed, of course, head to the channel sponsor, organicpricedbooks.com. Use the discount code STAYNERDY for $2 off your order and also to help support the channel. I will be extremely thankful for that. But without further ado, we will be going in order, 5 being the still important but not as important, 1 being the most important, obviously. But before we start with number 5, I do want to touch on a honorable mention that won't be in my top 5, but I still wanted to talk about it. And first up for the honorable mention, we are going to have the Ultimates Omnibus representing Ultimates issue 6. I believe I've touched on multiple times Ultimates being one of the first comic books that I first purchased with my own money, which was my lunch money at the time. It was technically, I believe, I always say Ultimates 2, but I believe it was Ultimates 6 and Spawn issue 121 were my 2 very first comic books that I ever purchased. Why I have Ultimates here instead of Spawn, because that fight with the Incredible Hulk, or the ultimate version of Hulk, between the team that will eventually be the Ultimates, is one that I remembered into my adult life so many times as a kid. This kind of happening, or when I bought these comic books, I was probably around the age 8, I'm going to guess, because these came out in like 2002, 2003. So really only buying comic books to have some cool pictures to look at and some ideas for the imagination when playing as a kid, and just so many times acting out this scene with friends, action figures, whatever it may be. Such an incredible fight. I remember the movies coming out, the animated Ultimates movies, enjoying those also, just absolutely resonated with me as a kid. I wasn't necessarily reading comics per se at that age. I was still a little young, not necessarily into reading at that point, but just I remember pulling out that issue so many times and just reading that entire fight, or looking at the pictures of that entire fight, and just having such a blast seeing Captain America take on the Hulk, Iron Man tackling the Hulk through Times Square, whatever it may be. Absolutely loved it. But I technically wasn't reading it or collecting it at the time. I did much later in life, but because it's not, I mainly got it for its pictures, I'm not going to put it on the list because I have much more important comic books because of the story, art, and just kind of every aspect of the book. But that's exactly why it's an honorable mention. So we'll wrap up with that and go ahead and jump into the list with number 5. And coming in at number 5 is JLA by Grant Morrison, the Omnibus. But really it's meant to represent just the JLA title in general. My first comic book that I ever purchased and started collecting with, not just for the pictures, but the story, was JLA 100. Not by Grant Morrison, but it is the JLA title, hence why Omnibus is kind of representing that. But in all honesty, the JLA title, the JLA team, is my Justice League. It's the Justice League I enjoy the most. It's the team that I envision when I try to envision the Justice League. We have Superman blue at first, eventually turning into Superman with the mullet, which was awesome for its time. Wally West, my favorite Flash. Kyle Rayner, my favorite Green Lantern. a lot of love and focus on Martian Manhunter, which I do not think happens in today's comics, and he is such an amazing character, but such a awesome book. It is so superhero-y and comic booky at the same time. It is a amazing read, not only because of the very extravagant and kind of amped up art, but also you have Grant Morrison on writing duties, so he is kind of breaking that wall and wanting you to think a little bit more while reading, not just tell you a cool story that you're going to enjoy. Obviously, that is the point, but definitely just trying to make you think outside the box while reading a comic book, and that's exactly what he does. Such an amazing story from beginning to end. JLA is just my Justice League title that I personally enjoy the most. Scott Snyder's run can rival it sometimes just because it's back to basics, but I think this is the first Justice League run that really tickled that superhero craving that I would eventually kind of develop during my comic book collecting career. But that does wrap up number 5, so we'll go ahead and jump to number 4. And coming in at number 4 is going to be Invincible by Robert Kirkman and Ryan Ottley. This is a itch that I didn't know I needed itch until I jumped into Invincible. The first Invincible issue that I collected, I believe, was 63, which is just after the Invincible War. Really not knowing what the heck was going on, and then obviously right after the Invincible War, we jump into the Conquest storyline, and I was absolutely hooked after that. The violence, the blood, the action, the teen angst and teen drama, full of romance, love, and passion. I mean, it is such an incredible read that when I was collecting single issues, I did very similar to what I did with JLA. Jumped immediately into the back issues, picked up Invincible number 1, even though this is technically a reprint or a second printing or something along those lines. It's not a first issue of Invincible, like first printed, but I got what I could at this point in my life. I didn't have adult money, so I really just had to pick up what I could. And I started picking up issues immediately. I wanted all of Invincible. I wanted all of the story. And right there, it was my favorite Image title. I realized that I loved Robert Kirkman as a writer. Ryan Ottley was impeccable when it comes to art and action sequences. I was hooked, ready to go, and I followed it to the end. Such an incredible series. I don't know how it's taking me this long to start upgrading to my Ultimate collections, but this is the third format that I've collected it in. Obviously, first collecting it in single issues, then in those 3 paperback compendiums, and now I'm recollecting it once again in the Ultimate collections. So you counted it, that is 3 dips into the same series. That's how important it is to me. That's how much fun it is to me. I cannot recommend it enough. It was the first book that I collected outside of DC and Marvel. And right there, I knew this was the place I wanted to be. These are the comic books that I wanted to read. And I kept just jumping in. But that's exactly why it's at number 4. I highly implore you guys to read it if you haven't already, or at least watch the Amazon Prime show. It's a pretty good representation of the series, but obviously I'm biased. Nothing's going to be better than the comic, in my personal opinion. But that does wrap up number 4, so we'll go ahead and jump to number 3. And number 3 is going to be Batman Hush by Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee. To represent this, I obviously did have issue 608, which is where the Hush story does begin, but I recently got this signed, so I just wanted to show this off instead. But this is the first comic book that I read and formed a favorite in the community, a favorite creator, and that was, of course, none other than Jim Lee. A lot of the older nerds out there that do know Jim Lee from his X-Men runs and everything like that, that was the first time you guys were exposed to him, and probably where you really formulated the opinion of loving his art. This was my first time I guess, experiencing him where I at least paid attention to it. And this is probably Jim Lee at his peak, in my opinion. This is regarded as some of his best artwork that he's ever done, and I couldn't agree more. I think the story is amazing. Jeff Loeb is one of my favorite writers as well. I know it gets some flack here and there, but again, it just feels like comic book fun. It feels like a blast when you're reading it. Incredible panels throughout this entire story. And also, it kind of impacted my life in the way where I spent a lot of my younger years kind of debating on forums, Facebook, social medias, whatever it may be, about superheroes, about comic books. That's how me and my brother honestly spent our time on social media. And this really started up a huge debate between Superman versus Batman, as silly as that sounds. And the fight that takes place in these pages between the two is probably still today used as a argument for why Batman can beat Superman. Um, and the art during the fight is amazing as well, so I don't blame them, but absolutely amazing book, amazing story. You get really all of the Bat family making an appearance, Bat friends, whoever it may be, if they're connected to Batman, whether in a villainous role or friendly role, they make an appearance. It is a awesome book. I did notice BJ Kicks put this on his list as well, so shout out to him for having amazing taste, and similar taste as well. But such a great read, can't recommend it enough. It is a blast from beginning to end, especially pertaining to the art, and Superman can definitely beat Batman. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump to number 2. And number 2 is The Death and Return of Superman, the omnibus. This has so much importance to me in general. This was my first whale that I wanted when I got into collecting. This was the first comic book I ever opened, which was Death of Superman. This was also the first trade paperback that I collected, which was Death of Superman as well. This is still my favorite Superman story. So a lot of first, a lot of importance here. My favorite picture of Superman ever is collected in this omnibus as well. Hopefully I'll be showing you that below or above, wherever the book is at. But such an amazing story in general as far as the contents of the book, but also why this came to be. The powers that be at DC really running dry on the ideas to put into Superman's comics, the man that is unkillable, the man that can do anything, until the best idea ever comes across, which is to let's just kill him. And the rest is history. We have the story. We get to experience the story, not only the death, but obviously the return. Sorry if that's a spoiler. Obviously, it says it in the title, but such a great read. To see the godlike being that is Superman pushed to his limit and really giving everything he has in a fight, especially a pacifistic character like Superman, giving everything he has in an altercation. Absolutely beautiful. The calm after the storm during the funeral period is even more beautiful. I cannot recommend this book enough. I mean, it has everything you possibly want. Beautiful art, comic book deaths, comic book returns, big fights, and even down to the issues and the paneling, how the paneling goes from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1, just to create even more intensity during the battle. Everything about it is just so thought out, and I cannot recommend it enough. It's one of my favorite reads, probably in my top 5 favorite reads in my life, so definitely check it out. But that does wrap up number 2, so let's wrap it up with number 1. And coming in at number 1 is my favorite run on my favorite character, which is none other than Captain America by Mark Waid and Ron Gardney and Andy Kubert. This is my favorite Captain America run. Captain America is my favorite superhero. Doesn't get much better than that. Obviously, I have the issue 1 here, went back and got a lot of back issues, as I said. This is the run that takes place during 1998, I believe, the later half of the 90s. I love 90s comics, and you have a lot of 90s goodness taking place in here. This book is the book that showed me the importance of Captain America, the impact of Captain America, how he is not a governmental stooge to just represent America. I feel like that is a extreme poor taste view of the character that is Captain America. And this is the run that really showed me that. Um, Honestly, the story Power and Glory, as well as American Nightmare, are two stories that showed the impact, the care, the ability that Captain America really has, and it doesn't involve his superpowers at all. It's really about his presence, his sense of morality, his moral code in general. And that speech at the end of Power and Glory is one for the ages. It is a speech I think everyone should read, especially people that do not like Captain America. I highly think you should read the speech at the end of Power and Glory. Made me really see what kind of man I kind of want to emulate and be, and also just the kind of man that Steve Rogers, Captain America, is as well, and why he is so important, not just to comics, but also just to the Marvel world. But such an amazing character. Obviously, Mark Waid is an incredible writer. Ron Gardney being one of my favorite comic or Captain America artists, and obviously Andy Kubert, amazing artist as well. But amazing read. Cannot recommend it enough. I do need this omnibus to be reprinted. Marvel, if you're listening, this had a horrible spine, so be careful if you are hunting down this omnibus. But I need to replace it. It deserves it. And also, I'm a fan of the energy shield that makes an appearance in this book as well. I personally enjoy it. I know it's not for everyone, but I think it really changed up Cap's game a little bit, and I personally loved it. But those are really all the reasons it's in number 1. It is my favorite run on my favorite character. It is the book that I think anyone that isn't a fan of Captain America, or maybe doesn't think Captain America is important, should read. And just can't recommend it enough. Definitely think it's one of those must-reads before you die or leave the community or whatever it may be. So definitely check that out. But that does wrap up my top 5. But that does wrap up today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed yourself. Comment down below your top 5. I would love to hear from you guys. I do believe that Bunkmaster B wanted the creators to call out other creators. My specific call outs would be probably some of the top dogs in the comic book YouTube world, which would be Omar, Near Mint Condition, Jem from Gem Mint Condition, Marcus from Mad Dog Comics. I would love to hear you guys' top 5s. All 3 of you have a pretty huge impact on the comic book creator space community on YouTube. So I would love to hear a lot of you guys' list and you guys talk about the comic books that are important to you. But that does wrap up today's video, so thank you so much for watching. If you are not a part of the Illuminati, hit that subscribe button. Also, if you do me a favor and hit that thumbs up icon, I'd very much appreciate that. But other than that, thank you again for watching, and of course, stay nerdy.